Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I'm proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker. And today he will tell us all about big bugs in the cinema. Echo, 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 echo. Greetings, Bert. How you doing, Brian?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you?
I'm well as well, and I'm really looking forward. I think it would brighten up my day to hear about big bugs in science fiction films.
Well, one of the things that inspired tonight's topic is Turner Classic Movies because they ran some giant bug movies just yesterday.
Ah, okay.
But another thing that inspired it was something that happened to me last year when I was still not retired. Uh, I One of my responsibilities was to coordinate. I guess that would be the best word. Our state fair display. We had our university has a building, and each division has a table, and I was responsible for my division's table. I did that for like 17 years. Well, the Davis College, which is our agricultural college, was very active and involved with the passersby, the fairgoers. And one of the professors had brought some giant cockroaches. I mean, they were like this big. I mean, they were huge.
Living ones?
Uh, huh?
Living ones?
Oh, yeah, they were alive. Oh, yes, they were alive. And it freaked, some people out, but kids loved it. Yeah, adults were the ones going, ew, and he brought it around to our exhibit. And I've got a picture of me holding one somewhere, and it's huge. It's at least a foot long, and completely harmless. Nothing disgusting, other than knowing that it's some sort of giant cockroach looking thing. Nothing horrific about it at all. It wasn't hurting me or anything like that. But it it, it took a little. I had to screw up the courage to actually do it. It took me a good, I'd say 5-10 seconds to say, okay, you can put it in my hand. And then as it turns out, I wasn't grossed out by it at all. But I think bugs are a great way to enhance your horror film. Um, and the bigger they are, the better they are, really. I had to eliminate some films from this topic because the bugs, like the swarm, they weren't giant. There's just lots of them. So we had to eliminate things like that. And I thought about talking about Tremors, a great early 90s horror film, but that's not a bug. So I had to eliminate that movie. But there's so many other movies to talk about. You'll remember a few months ago, Bert I. Gordon, the famous director who did some giant bug movies, passed away. And we talked a bit about him during one of our episodes. He did so many movies where, well, he usually did giganticism, in some format. Although he did make a movie called Attack of the Puppet People, where he shrank everybody down. It's a John Agar movie, and it's a lot of fun. All of Burt I. Gordon's movies are fun, but he did the giant bug thing for so long. He did more than bugs too. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Village of the Giants.
I've definitely seen it. I don't remember much of it, but I have
Okay,
seen
it, it's not really a horror film so much as sort of a teen drama, juvenile delinquent kind of thing. But it almost feels like a beach movie. It's in that era. It was made in 1965. And it stars Tommy Kirk and Johnny Crawford from The Rifleman. Tony Basil is in it. It's got a pretty good cast. Bo Bridges, Joy Harmon. Um, oh, and I cannot remember Tisha Sterling, who is Robert Sterling's daughter with oh, I can't think of that actress's name. It'll come to me pretty soon. It's got a really good cast, and what he makes the teens huge in this. they've eaten this chemical compound made by Opie from the Andy Griffith Show. Ronnie Howard, he's the like boy genius in the film, and he creates this compound that makes ducks grow. Well, the kids eat it, and then they grow, and then they try to take over town. It's a fun movie, but it's not a horror movie. The movies that I came up with were Them, which is not Bird Eye Court. Them is a terrific film, and some bug movies might be B movies and might have some passages that don't quite work and are kind of laughable. I can't say that about Them because Them is a fantastic horror movie. It stars James Whitmore, Joan Weldon, Edmund Gwynn, who is the Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street,
Mhm.
is in it, and he is Joan Weldon's father. James Arness from Gunsmoke is in it
I
too.
remember him.
And there's a little girl in the film who's now close to 80 years old, but she's a small child in Them, and Them came out in 1954, so it's a nearly 70-year-old movie. Her name is Sandy Desher. She carries a lot of the weight. I think a lot of the dramatic weight of the film. She has seen something really horrific happen to her parents. We don't well, we know what happened to them. We just don't know in what manner it happened. But it was horrific, and she can't speak. And when she smells this certain chemical substance, she goes nuts and starts speaking and screaming. And she does a really, for like an 8 or 9 year old, she couldn't have been very old in the movie. She does a terrific job in it. It's very well acted. The giant, I think they're, what are they, grasshoppers or something like that, or locusts, or it's pretty well done, especially for 1954. Um, Special effects. All you could really do was rear projection, or you might be able to mat out one scene and then shoot over it with another. But that was really all you or using a lot of miniatures, with giant bugs. You didn't have a whole lot of options, and to make it look good, I think was tough. And Them succeeds. It's a really good movie, one of my favorites.
I
And
remember, I remember being impressed by that movie as well.
there's a sound that um, another thing about the movie that really makes an impression, and makes it a good horror film, is that sound is used in it to sort of heighten the tension, as it should. But instead, they're using sound effects as opposed to music to get this reaction out of you, and it's really effective. And there again, the child actress in this film, Sandy Desher, does a fantastic job. She worked for, I don't know, I would say a good 15 or so years, until she was an adult, young adult, in films. She's also in The Space Children, which is one of my favorite sci-fi films from the late 1950s. It's a lot of fun. But she worked quite a bit, and and as I said, does a great job in the movie. Um, she's she's creepy, and you really feel for what's happened to her, because there's enough foreboding in the film for you to figure out that her parent, mommy and daddy didn't make it. Um, just a terrific film. Really well done. It did set the stage for a lot of other giant bug movies that might not have been as good. But one of my favorites is The Black Scorpion. Um, it has one of my favorite actresses in it, Mara Corday, who is still with us. She's 93 years old, um, and made quite a few films in the 1950s. She was under contract to Universal for a while, and that's where she met her eventual husband, Richard Long, the actor, who was in Big Valley, House on Haunted Hill, Nanny and the Professor. Was one of his series on television. She was gorgeous pinup model from the 1950s, and had a pretty solid acting career going for a while. And rather than her acting career not being so strong, I think she stepped away from the screen because she'd gotten married. They had three kids eventually. They had them pretty quickly, like every 2 years or so. And I think that got in the way of her career. And she never really did reestablish it, even after he died. Richard Long died fairly young. He died in 1974 at the end of the year. And he was only 47 years old, but he had a bad heart condition and knew it. But from what I understand, continued to drink and smoke. The two things that you're really not supposed to do if you've got a heart problem. On the other hand, I guess you might be thinking, well, the bullet's heading my way anyway. I might as well toke up, have a shot. I guess there's two ways to look at that, aren't there?
As with most things.
Well, I can either ignore this and destroy myself or try to save myself and die anyways. But that's what happened to him. Interestingly, she never remarried after that. They had a really rocky marriage. You can go back and find numerous gossip columns from the 50s and 60s about how they were in divorce court and splitting up, and then they would get back together, and then I mean, it was just constant throughout their marriage. So I don't blame her for not wanting to get into that again. that would keep me single too. Uh, but anyway, I don't think Mara Corday gets the recognition that she should really get. She's a better actress than she would be ordinarily given credit for. And Richard Denning is her love interest in the Black Scorpion, and it's a really fun giant bug movie. It gets a big thumbs up from me.
The last time I saw the Black Scorpion was when The Rock came out as a Scorpion King in The Mummy Returns, and then
Oh yeah.
yeah, I have this whole thing with scorpion symbology, which we'll get into another day. Too big of a digression, but anyway, I started looking around for all these films and books with scorpions and the Scorpion King in them, and I got a chance to rewatch it back then. Don't remember very much now, but back then I could have recited the plot and all the actions very easily.
There's not a whole lot of plot. They're in Mexico and a giant scorpion shows up. But the actors, I mean, Richard Denning and Mara Corday are very charismatic, and they're eminently watchable, even if the plot is just sort of what. um, the next movie that I wanted to talk about actually is a Burt I. Gordon movie, and it's known by several titles. Some people would know it as The Spider. A lot of people would know it as Earth versus the Spider. And there are still a few other titles. Those are the two big ones. Earth versus the Spider is a really classic 50s sci-fi film that you often see, brief clips from in films that are essentially compendiums of 1950s sci-fi clips. They use Earth versus the Spider a lot. It stars June Kenny, who was an actress that Burt I. Gordon actually used more than once. She was she passed away fairly recently, within the last couple of years, but made kind of an impact in B movies and on television. And there again, when she got married and started a family, she decided to just step away from it, unfortunately. But a very good actress and a fun movie. Her father is kind of notorious around town for being an alcoholic, although he's portrayed as he's not a violent alcoholic or anything like that. And his daughter loves him very much, but he is known to tie one on from time to time, and he goes to a distant town to get her a birthday present. And as he's driving back, the giant spider gets him, and he's the first victim. I hope that's not a huge spoiler, but he's the first victim in the movie, and a lot of the movie centers around her love for her father and trying to figure out what happened to him, and trying to make the town see that he's missing because something bad happened to him, rather than he's just like drunk in an alley somewhere. But it's a fun movie, and you get some pretty thrilling scenes toward the end of Earth versus the Spider, um, with with June Kenny getting potentially getting caught in one of the webs. So it's a fun movie, and definitely good for Saturday afternoon matinee fodder, or even in a double bill at the drive-in. Lots of fun.
Indeed. How about the fly? Does the fly count as a giant bug? Because it's a
Well, the fly certainly does, and there were three of
yes.
there was the original The Fly with Vincent Price, and oh golly, who else was David Hedison, a character actor who worked for decades. David Hedison, he had a TV show in the '60s that escapes my memory at this point, but a well-known television show. And in the '70s, he was Felix Leiter in the Live and Let Die, um,
Mhm.
the 1973 movie that came out. It was the first Roger Moore James Bond movie. I don't know if he was in any others as Felix Leiter, but he's Bond's American contact, with the American government. Yeah, the original Fly, I think, is a fantastic science fiction movie. For one thing, it's shot in color, which you didn't often get in lower budgeted sci-fi movies, but they spent a little more on The Fly than they would have some of these others. It is shot in color. It's got a great cast. Herbert Marshall is in it, who was an actor from way back. And he kind of lends an air of sophistication, as does Vincent Price. I mean, it's hard to hate on a Vincent Price movie. I just can't do it. He always makes it watchable. He never turns in like a dull performance where he's just reading his lines like this or something. He always gives you what you paid for. Gives you a performance, and he does in this movie. The Fly is a great movie. And it was remade in 1986 with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. And although I'm usually remake averse, that's a really good version of the film, I
It
think.
is indeed.
It's very well done. It is done with a big budget, but it was done well. And it's acted well. It tugs at the emotions, and it's a heartbreaking movie at the end.
Yes.
No matter which way you look at it. But horror films usually are heartbreaking. There-
Oh, they're
there's
horror films. That's
exactly
good.
everything doesn't turn out well in the end. There's always a big pile of dead bodies. It's
Some of my
part of
favorite
the genre.
movies are science fiction movies. What is that series? They made about these space marines, and um,
Oh,
it takes place on this planet and other planets, and there were a bunch of sequels to them. There was an animated series, and there was role-playing games and all sorts of things.
mm,
I don't remember what it's called.
I can't either.
Space bugs, and humanity was at war with the space bugs, and uh, that had giant bugs all over the place, on our planet and other planets.
I think a lot of that, especially in the '50s, was born out of um, the nuclear arms race,
Yes.
and wondering what this radiation would do to things.
Starship Troopers.
I mean, can it make something tiny and insignificant huge and horrifying? Um, if you track horror films, and as a place to start, we'll look at Universal in the early 1930s. The monsters were all at least humanoid. Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, um,
Sure,
various sundry others.
man.
I guess with World War II, people had seen so much horror for years that um, Frankenstein's monster maybe didn't have the impact that it once had. And I have to say, I can still vividly remember the first time I saw the original James Whale's original Frankenstein. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I was staying up late one night, and I think my mother or my father, so one of my parents said, "Oh, this is a good movie," and we started watching it. I watched it, kind of like this, the whole time, especially after you see the monster. Uh, but I stayed with it until the end. It probably didn't go off until 1:30 in the morning, and I was a little kid, but it made such an impact on me. Um, but war weary audiences had seen so much
Horror.
real horror, that vampires and man-made monsters weren't as scary anymore, and you had to have something new. You could always look to science fiction for the latest in terrifying things. I guess that's a good way to look at it. And some of my favorite movies do marry horror and science fiction.
Mine too.
It's a great teaming of two different genres. Um, and two genres that I love very much. And I'm glad you brought up The Fly because um, I think Return of the Fly, which is the second Fly movie from the late 1950s, which Vincent Price is in also. Brett Halsey is the um, young virile male lead in this film. And let's see. It's not as big of a it didn't have as big of a budget as the original Fly movie because the two sequels are done in black and white, which always struck me as being odd. Um, I saw The Fly first, well before I saw the two sequels. And when I saw the Return of the Fly, I thought, well, this is black and white. I wonder if this was a color film, and for the purpose of television broadcast or something, it's just in black and white. No, they were shot in black and white, which I think is kind of weird
Yeah,
for a sequel to a film in color. But I guess it's all the money they had. And The Return of the Fly is a pretty good movie in public domain, interestingly. So you can watch that one for free, and that's at least that's my impression is that it's public domain. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The third film in the trilogy is Curse of the Fly, which is the cheapest of the three movies. Curse of the Fly is actually a British film. It was made in 1965, and it stars Brian Donlevy, who had done a lot of film noir in the 1940s. Very well-known actor, worked often. Toward the end of his life, he did some horror films just to stay working. Interestingly, late into life, I think just a few years before he died, he married Bela Lugosi's ex-wife,
oh wow.
Lillian, and the mother of Bela Lugosi Jr. So they were married, like I think from 1966 until he died in 1972. They weren't married very long. She had been Brian Donlevy's assistant. She sort of worked to pay the bills, and then was divorced, so I mean she had to work. Um, but I think that's how they got together. Is that she worked for Brian Donlevy, and he seemed like a pretty decent guy. I, I think I've heard that maybe he enjoyed a drink or two every now and then, like any good Irishman. But I haven't heard anything very terrible or anything about Brian Donlevy, and
Um,
he's always good in his films. Of the other cast in Curse of the Fly, George Baker is in it, well-known British actor who Can also be seen in a 007 film or two. And for me, is probably best known for his work in I, Claudius, which those of us who used to watch PBS back in the 70s and 80s remember it airing on Masterpiece Theater in installments. I, Claudius was brilliantly done. A very inexpensive British series, but very well done. Do you remember that?
Very, very faintly.
Oh, okay. I had, well, I think we got the DVD set about, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, and had a great time going back through it and watching it. I don't think we pulled it out since then. Might be time to do that again. It's got a great cast, and Derek Jacobi is in it. Let's see, George Baker, Brian Blessed, uh, Magenta from the Rocky Horror Picture Show is in it. I can't
Ah,
remember her name right offhand. Really, lots of good British character actors pop up in it as well.
um, before we move on and before I forget, I'm doing a new sporadic series with Michael Del Rusi,
Mhm.
who's Sword and Sandal Cinema and our Herculean Physique shows. And he's been getting into the UFO shows as well, on how the Sword and Sandal films affected lives. So I'd love to have you on as a guest. We've spoken of it before, but
Oh,
just to focus on you and the transformative power of Sword and Sandal cinema in your particular life.
sure. I actually, just by you're saying that, I've got a bunch of ideas for that.
Awesome. And I also want to invite you. I'm going to be doing some things on Bella Cortez's films.
Yes.
I was
Mhm.
wondering if you'd like to interview about Giants of Metropolis, which is one of the ones I'm planning.
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay, great. And there's more, but it'll wait till another time.
That's that's okay. Another bug film, and this is really a sentimental favorite of mine. Is The Wasp Woman?
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
Another public domain film that anybody can watch for free. And it's got another movie with a great cast. It's got Susan Cabot in her last film, and she is the title character, the Wasp Woman. Anthony Isley is in it, who good character actor from the 60s and 70s. Barbara Morris, who did a lot of American international films in the late 50s and early 60s, is another star of The Wasp Woman. And my old friend Aaron Kincaid. It's actually his first movie role. He's uncredited in it, but he's at the very beginning. He's a beekeeper and he has the beekeeper's hat on, but you can still make out his features, through the netting. Um, anyway, the Wasp Woman is. Uh, I'm sure there have been many dissertations written about this film because of how it casts women, and I can certainly understand why. But being made in the late 50s, if you couch it during the time at which it was filmed, I mean, it makes sense. But you have another, woman as monster here. But in this case, Susan Cabot becomes a monster because she's trying to turn back the clock. She's trying to look younger. She owns a cosmetics company, and she's trying to come up with, some sort of substance, a wrinkle cream or something like that, that'll make her face look younger. And she hires a chemist who uses royal jelly um, in his injections, and he's able to make small animals much younger. He can take, a big rat and turn it into a baby, or an old cat and turn it back into a kitten. So she becomes the test subject, and like 25 years is taken off her face. I mean, Susan Cabot was a beautiful woman, but they've got her made up to look really old. You could see the makeup job they've got on her just to make her look old. And then when the injections start working again, they take the makeup off, and suddenly she looks, like 26 or however old she would have been at that time, probably early 30s. But I mean, she looks yeah, great, in it. Um, and it goes from there. She starts transforming into a wasp, starts killing people. It's a fun movie. It really is. I see why this might have been the nadir of her career, but but uh, on the other hand, it's such a fun film, and she didn't make that many movies. She had a contract with Universal in the early 50s. She didn't like the way it was going, so when it ended, she went back to New York and tried to, um, get into Broadway, and then she didn't quite get into anything. And she was doing some off-Broadway stuff. Ran into Roger Corman, of all people, and he brought her back to Hollywood. Um, I'd say like 2 years or so after her Universal contract ended. They dated briefly
I did
as
not
well.
know.
Roger Corman didn't marry until much later in life. I think he was probably, I don't know, 45 years old, maybe a little older by the time he did marry. Um, and Susan Cabot had, I think, an early marriage under her belt. She had a hard scrabble youth. She was brought up in a series of foster homes. And I think her first marriage was probably an attempt to like, break that cycle, and get out of the foster system. Um, didn't last very long. She did have a second marriage, but this would have been after her acting career had sort of finished up. And she had a child out, which in the early 60s, this would have been a big scandal, but she had a child out of wedlock. And it's rumored that it was King Hussein of Jordan's child
Wow.
because they were an item. He bankrolled her life. He bought her a Rolls Royce. He bought her a place to live. Um, she things that she would not have been able to afford making Roger Corman films. With that paycheck, that's not going to buy you a Rolls Royce. Um, he could not marry her because she was born Harriet Shapiro, so she was likely Jewish, and that would have been a big no-no for King Hussein Jordan. So they were never married. But I think he did sort of fund the rest of her life, or at least for a while. Um, and I think he did send her checks for their child. Their child had dwarfism,
Ah,
and she Susan Cabot noticed, when he was about, I think, 3, 4, 5 years old, that he just wasn't getting any bigger. And they started giving him human growth hormone, and he did grow. I think he grew to over 5 feet. I mean, he got to something approximating a reasonable height. She was tiny herself. I mean, she probably wasn't any more than 5 feet tall. Um, but she noticed that the human growth hormone that her son was taking just made him look young. He uh, just even it's hard to look old, I guess, for a 6 or 7 year old, but it made him look younger, and she started shooting herself up with it. And as we all know now, I mean, a lot of people who can afford it will take human growth hormone because
right.
it actually can turn back the clock somewhat. For men, I mean, I thought on numerous occasions that, gosh, I should probably do that. It would probably bankrupt me after a while, but it would be nice to not watch any muscularity on my frame, slithering away. It would be nice to see some of the cracks in my skin reverse. But if you follow the moral of the story of the wasp woman, that will kill you.
Yeah, I was just about to say this, the similarities between this and the wasp woman there, very clear.
It's weird and eerie, isn't it? And well, what happened to poor Susan Cabot was she had apparently gotten a little crazy toward the end of life. Um, and her son, who was, I don't know, 21, 22 at the time, bludgeoned her to death. She was, I think, close to 60 or so when this happened. But it's from everything I've read, it sounds like, I'm not saying she had it coming or anything like that, but it sounds like her mania had gotten pretty bad.
And yeah.
And he probably wasn't in a good mental place either. He didn't live very long. He died in his early 40s. Um,
Related to this, but a little off the beaten path, like many of the things I managed to interject. There's an old story of Hercules, which does not survive, but illustrations from the story survive in plastic art on pottery shards and vases and things like that. They have Hercules fighting with Eos, who's old age. So Yetis is tiny and hunchbacked and spindly armed, and Hercules is Hercules, and he's swinging his club. So they're fighting, and then in other depictions, they're like chatting, like they're all buds, and the stories don't survive. Is it part of the same story? Is it different stories? We don't know. But confronted with this image, and I started contemplating it as I get older. And when you first know that you are getting older and you're getting all these effects that you don't want because you're getting older, you try to fight it. And so you're fighting old age. It's a
you
losing
have
battle,
to.
but you fight it with exercise, with vitamins, with growth hormone, with
What
whatever.
you watch anything and everything you put in your mouth.
Right. So that's the Hercules fighting old age. But then at the same time, you can't escape the realization that this happens to everybody who
Oh
makes.
yeah, yeah, and you're going to lose that fight.
Yeah, you're going to lose that.
I don't care how hard you fight, you're going to lose it at some point. However, I do think that my doctor, once said something to me similarly. You have to fight it though, because that's going to make your what life you have better.
Exactly. And through that acceptance, you could let go of a lot of things. I found that by accepting it and fighting it at the same time, I've let go of a lot of things that I felt I needed to do, or it's like, why? I haven't done them so far. I really didn't want to do that anyway, or that was what my father wanted me to do. You kind of sort through all this weight that you're carrying on your shoulders, and you find that a lot of it could just go away. That and you start looking at your life too, and you realize that not only you, but every single person on the planet did the best that they could with who they are and what they know at that particular point in time. So a lot of
No,
let go.
I don't believe. No, I don't believe that. Some people, yes, not everybody.
So some people, many people, but you get to let go of a lot of resentments and grudges that you've been carrying on for years. Just
It's too much effort.
it's too much effort. So anyway,
There's a lot that it takes something out of you to hate somebody,
uh,
and
so-
if you keep carrying that around, it's going to eat you alive. You have to give it up after a while. No matter how much fun, how much fun it is to hate them, how much you relish it, you've got to give it up because it will consume you. And then you don't have time for anything that you enjoy.
right,
You're just constantly dwelling on somebody who wronged you. You have to get past it. You do.
you do.
Maybe you don't have to forgive it, but try to forget it.
The Hercules legend, his kingship was stolen. He was supposed to be the king of the Persid Empire, and Hera conspired with the goddesses of childbirth and some other goddess to cheat him of that. But he became a god. He became an Olympian god, and he became the father of dynasties. So there too, it's like you might not have gotten what was yours or what you deserved or whatever you may have thought, but maybe you can get something much better than that that blows away what you originally felt you have been wrongly cheated of by life.
And quite on personally, just between you and me, I think my life's been pretty good. I can't really complain. I can complain because I feel crappy with the arthritis, but beyond that, I somebody to me said to me today that I looked a lot better than I did the last time he had seen me, and I was really, because I haven't lost an ounce. Trying to lose weight at this age is tough, and I could stand to lose 25 pounds really fast. Um, but he just said it was on my face. He said you look more relaxed. You don't look stressed out. And I was like, well, yeah, I haven't gone into work in 3 months. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, I teach Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So I am going to work, but it's just for a couple of hours. It's
Mhm.
not like being there for 40 plus hours a week. And it is such a liberating feeling.
Well,
It
certainly,
has made life so much better.
I'm semi-retired too. Yes, it is. It's fantastic being semi-retired.
But that doesn't mean that you don't want to work, or that you don't want
Right.
to contribute something to society. You just don't want to do what you were doing.
Right.
I've known a lot of people who have reached this juncture in life, and some of them did just never work again, and others went on to entirely new careers, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for here. Yeah.
If I could find a way to make a new career out of mythology,
Yeah. Mhm.
you can certainly. My what I've wanted to accomplish has always been something like off the wall and crazy. And back when I was working the human services in workforce development and vocational rehabilitation, that
Mhm.
was what I used to do in my motivational things. I found ways to be a barbarian and to have my own television show. All sorts of weird shit like that. So whatever the thing was, whatever their dream is, it's not as crazy as my dreams. And if I can make my dreams happen and pay, then certainly, whatever you want to do is within your sphere. A lot of people don't want to hear what you have to do to get something off the wall. You have to do years of free stuff, to show people what it is that you're trying to tell them, or to show them. And then when it becomes a reality and people experience it, then some people want it and they're willing to pay for it, and it becomes your career. But until that, you're doing a lot of stuff with no remuneration. But that's what it takes in order to get the experiences you need to have. And in order to learn how to do what you want to do, you have to just do it. And
Very true. And you have to have some other way of supporting yourself,
right, exactly.
which that's fine. I think that everybody needs a hobby, and if you can take your hobby and make some money from it, so be it. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. It's hard to get those two, hobby and money making endeavors. It's hard to marry those two, but if you can, that's great. And I've been able to do that, some with the drive-in.
Yes.
Much more so 20 years ago than now, sadly. But that's that just means that I need to figure out a different way to monetize things.
And you will.
Yeah, I will. I've had, like I said, I've had a few ideas kicking around. Some of them are better than others. I would still love a physical presence somewhere. I would love to like swoop in and buy an old drive-in
That'd be
and
great.
and completely redo it. Although that sounds like a lot of work at this stage in life, but but who knows? I mean, it might not seem like work at all. If I enjoy doing it.
I found that a lot of things, even when they start paying money and they become businesses or evolving into businesses, if you love doing it, it isn't a job at all. It's just something you love doing, and now you have the advantage of people paying you to do it. So you could do it more often even.
True. Yeah, that is very true.
And you've devoted a big chunk of your life to building the drive-in theater.
Yes, I have a
Powerful
lot of it.
brand that's known worldwide among certain people who think very highly of you.
Mm.
And so I can definitely see that happening for you.
Well, and it's just up to me to get with it and build it into something. And it's time. And I do think I'm motivated enough to do it.
And
I guess we'll see.
one of the things I used to do on my TV show is every year, I had 3 seasons. Every season, I would think of something impossible to do and then figure out ways to do it. And I think the second or third season, I don't remember now, it's been a long time ago. But I decided to make a movie. So I knew nothing about making movies, but I knew Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma and I knew the Trauma folks. So Lloyd became my Obi-Wan Kenobi and he gave me much wisdom. And I went out and first we made a 6-minute short that was shown at the Lake Placid Film Festival. That led to a whole season talking about this adventure and making a movie. And it actually led to like 3 of the episodes being condensed into a 60-minute documentary that got a limited, like local theatrical release as well as being on
Wow.
cable TV. So again, I didn't know what I was doing, but that I didn't let that deter me, and it happened. Then, of course, things like September 11th, and now
Mhm.
things like COVID and hurricanes kind of set you back, and you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and ask yourself, "Do I really want to do this now?" But it is very possible to do these things, no matter how dreamlike they may seem.
Yeah, you just have to ignore the pestilence, you the giant bugs. Speaking of giant bugs, there are a couple more movies that I wanted to talk about before we wrap up.
Okay.
Two of my favorite movies from the 70s are giant bug movies. And one of them is a Bert I. Gordon film. It's Empire of the Ants, which has a great cast, by the way. It's Joan Collins at a low point in her career. She was convinced that she'd never work again if this movie ever saw the light of day, but actually it was kind of the beginning of her career resurgence, whether she liked that or not. Um, Robert Lansing is in the film as well. He's sort of a crusty old, just a crusty older guy, and he buddies up with Jacqueline Scott, who's in the film as well. But it also has a cast of John David Carson, who was in a lot of 70s movies and passed away pretty young back in 2009, is in it. Pamela Susan Shoop, Robert Pine from Chips is in the film as well. It's shot in the Florida Everglades, and the entire film is about Joan Collins running this really shady real estate development in Florida. Imagine that. Uh, and it is a very shady outfit. And the come on with, I don't know if you and Athena have ever experienced one of these where somebody's trying to sell you a timeshare or a retirement, a villa or something like that, and
Yes. Yeah.
they want you to do one of these 2 or 3 hour tours, and if you do that, you get free tickets for something on the Vegas Strip or what have you, wherever it is that
We never took that step, but we've had people approach us for it many times.
we have two, and we've never done it either. I had I'm notorious for having absolutely no patience, and being locked into an experience like that, a sales pitch for 3 hours just sounds like hell to me. I'd rather dig a ditch. But a lot of people do it because there's usually some sort of reward at the end, whether it's a meal or attraction tickets or theater tickets, something like that. And that's kind of the crux of this movie. Joan Collins is doing a tour, and trying to get these people to you kind of buy into the community, and you get a little bit of insight into everybody's lives, and you find out that there's absolutely nobody on this trip who could even begin to afford a vacation home. But that's okay because none of the infrastructure has been done for this planned community. There are pipes that are just stuck into the ground. They're not connected to anything, just to fool um,
Investors.
the potential customers. And it's sort of fun to see Joan Collins get taken down by one of the ants because she is a really unlikable, sleazy real estate agent in the film. She does a really good job at it. Even though she thought she'd never work again, it didn't mean that she was going to show up, and just phone her lines in. I mean, she does a good job in the movie. Everybody does, and it is a Burt Gordon, film, making it even more fun. The other one I wanted to mention was we've talked about the director from Northern Wisconsin, Bill Rebane, in the past. Well, his giant bug movie is called The Giant Spider Invasion, and is just hilariously bad. uh, um, in the movie, they've taken a Volkswagen Beetle and put legs on it. It is so funny. And the movie's got a great cast too. I don't know how he talked all of these people into going to Northern Wisconsin to make this terrible film. But Barbara Hale is the star of the film, and her husband is in it as well, Bill Williams. Steve Brody is one of the actors. One of Steve Brody's kids is in it. Leslie Parrish, quite the dish from 1960s films. Still looks great in this movie, but it's kind of a big step down from what she used to do. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else in. Oh, Alan Hale is in it briefly. I think he's a cop or something like that in the movie. It's There's nothing scary about it. It's just good fun to watch. And I can't, like, there again, I can't believe that the director was able to talk all those people into coming to Wisconsin to make a movie. Maybe you're right. Maybe if you do challenge yourself by saying, I'm going to do the impossible, I'm going to get Barbara Hale to Northern Wisconsin. Hey, he did it.
Hey, you never know who's going to say it. I interviewed
Well, I guess so. I guess you're right.
Harryhausen. I contacted him out of the blue, and I had an in-person interview with Ray Harryhausen. So again, you never
Oh,
know.
wow.
Yeah, that's on YouTube. Still, it was when I was doing Thor the Barbarian. So the interview or parts of it, the edited parts of it, are there. But you never know who's going to say yes. So you can ask. The worst they could do is ignore you or curse you out. That's really the worst that can happen. And you'd really be surprised that the people who will, once you explain what you're doing, will say, yeah, sure.
Hmm. No, I agree. You just have to be willing to ask.
Years ago, I asked someone, Brian Walker's his name, if he'd mind being on a on a show. And here we are, still doing shows years later. So
One thing that you will find about me is that I rarely say no to anything. Um,
that's fine.
I only now that I think about it, it is rare that I say no to anything.
So I'm glad I didn't know that, but I'm glad that that's the case because here we are.
Well, I always think I don't think I've had a lot of missed opportunities in my life. But the rare few that I have, it's been because I've said no to something that I probably should have said yes to. So I've tried to learn from some of my more mistakes in my past. And as I said, I rarely say no to anything unless I think it's going to be disastrous to my personal health or my financial condition. Other than that, sure, why not try it? You never know.
Yeah, you do. You never know.
No, and I don't want to limit myself. And it's kind of easy to do at this age. You get stuck in routines and ruts, and I actively trying to avoid that. And by saying yes is a way to do it.
There you go. Not only did people get a lot of information on bug movies, but they got valuable life lessons.
That's right. Yeah, stick with me. I'll shape you up.
There you go.
You just have to do everything I say.
There you go.
Nobody ever has. That would be a first in my life.
Our next adventure will make an infomercial, and you never.
I I can't I can't even get the kids in my 130 class to send me their LinkedIn URLs. So I asked them to do that. Half of them sent them.
That's sad.
Like, in the like the 1230 class all sent them in. I mean, it was not a problem, but the 130, They just couldn't be bothered.
Were the reasons given? Is that it, that they couldn't be bothered, or did they have objections on some of the?
No, they didn't have any objections. I suspected some of them just didn't have LinkedIn profiles. Um, but no, it wasn't that they objected; they just didn't do it. And I, attached a few points to sending me. That's an in-class exercise. So I said 5 points. Send me your URL. So if they don't send it, no, they don't get the 5 points.
I tried that when I was teaching in some college in Pennsylvania. I had a class on multiculturalism.
Hmm,
That was a fun class,
I'll
and
bet.
it had multimedia. So one of my classes centered on a Sopranos episode about
Cool.
Columbus Day. So he was, but anyway, there I discovered very many scary things, some of which I've shared. But one of them was, as you discovered, people did not want to give you like information. They wouldn't agree to doing things, and they gave no reason for not doing it. So again, it's their education,
Hmm.
so that's fine with me. You won't get out of it what I put into it.
Well, true. Very, very true.
It'll affect your grades. So by a couple of points. Anyway, on that note, I have to be going. I enjoyed our conversation as I always do, and I look forward to future projects as I always do. One more future project before we go. Uh, I liked your presentation on movies on Venus, uh,
Oh, well, thank you.
and I'm very sorry that you didn't get to finish it. So would you like to finish it on another show rather than waiting for the next panel?
Sure. We're going to talk Thursday. Do you want to?
We could do Thursday, or I could do a special Venus episode, and we could talk about it there. Whatever you prefer.
Uh, let's just continue on for Thursday. We'll take another look at Venusians in film.
And we'll cover Zontar, and we'll cover
Oh,
and there's all
oh,
sorts of, like vampire vixens from Venus. There's
mhm.
Starship Venus. There's all sorts of exploitation films with Venus.
Oh, lots of yes,
Okay, so
lots.
so it's a plan.
Well,
Brian,
yeah, we'll do that then.
you're awesome, and say hi to Greg, and I'll
I'll
talk to
do
you in a couple of days.
that. Okay, see you Thursday.
And I'm going to try to get this up tonight. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Until next time, joyous journeys and amazing adventures.
Good night.
Good night.